Hey guys, how are y'all doing today? I'm Farmer Eli. I'm the Historic Farm Program Manager right here at Brattonsville. And what we want to bring to you today is one of the traditions that we do every spring. Right now, but we wanted to be able to kind of let y'all see about how we gave these girls a haircut. Today, most people use a set of electric shears. Electric shears were invented in the late 1880s. And by about 1920, most people were using electric shears. They're a lot more efficient. But before that, of course, we used hand shears. And these shears, what we need to do, of course, is make sure they're super sharp. Just like cutting paper with a pair of scissors, you need to have a sharp set of scissors. Same thing here, so we use a sharpening stone. What I'm doing, of course, is there's only one edge to these scissors. And that edge, of course, is what we do is we hold it in about a 45-degree angle. And what I'm doing is I'm just sharpening the edges up because we want to make sure these are really sharp. People ask me all the time, why do we still use hand shears? And there's still people, even in the industry, that still use hand shears for two reasons. For one, you know, we're going to do some pretty close cutting on some sensitive areas here. It's just a lot less noise, so it makes it a lot easier for it to keep these girls calm. Secondly, it doesn't shear as close to their skin, so it leaves them a little bit more wool in the ground. So the more wool we can leave on her, the just more comfortable she is. A lot of people ask me, do I sedate them? These are prey animals, so once they're caught, they become extremely docile. The main thing you want to do is make sure their feet are not touching the back feet or touching the ground, because this is what they're going to use to kick with. But if you notice, she is calm and collective. She has never been sheared before. She was born last year right here on this site. And so she has the prized wool, which is virgin wool, just a lot more thicker, a lot softer. Gulf Coast sheep adapted to the southern climate. They were able to lose the wool off their legs, their bellies, and their face. So what we're doing, of course, is I'm making sure I'm not going to hurt her. Sheep have 2 layers of skin. So we have a thin outer layer, and there's not much blood vessels in between the 2 layers. So if I do happen to nick her, we're not really going to have much of an issue. And plus, she's got lanolin on here. Y'all may be familiar with that with hair products. You'll see the yellowness of the wool. And, you know, we use that in cosmetics. But that also works as an antiseptic. We know the sheep were brought over here, Plymouth settlement, early 1600s, and they really didn't take off really good in America. Further along, as we started developing areas, we saw an explosion of sheep population because what we're getting from it is wool. Now, wool was extremely popular in early America because it was warm. It was real easy to spin. So that's also the reason why we had wool. If you look at all of our outfits back then were either made out of linen or wool. Guys, I don't know if you see what I'm doing here. I'm slowly lifting this up, and in that turn, I'm able to lift this whole fleece off in one piece. That's what we shoot for. I know. Good girl. All right, guys, well, we're just now starting to finish up on this lady here. Good job. She's been such a great one. So what I'm doing now, of course, is I'm trimming up right past that. You remember before I told you that I would go right on the edge of that backbone. Well, I'm coming up to the backbone now. So we're gonna get ready to turn her loose. All righty, stand up. Good job. Good job. So you see she looks a lot smaller now. She's a good girl. She'll go back out. Her hair will grow back out in a couple months. Her wool, you did a good job. If you look here, we got a lot of wool here.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm one of the interpreters here. And now that we've got the wool off the sheep, it's time for the next step, which is cleaning it up. When it comes off of the sheep, it looks a lot like this. And we want it to look more like this. So to do that, we need to wash it. There are actually a couple of ways historically that they did this. They would either wash the wool once it's off the sheep, or they could wash it while it was still on the sheep. We're going to wash it off the sheep today. I think washing it on the sheep gets you a wet, angry sheep. So we're going to wash it once it's been sheared. It's less wiggly that way. The first thing we're going to need to get all this wool clean is soap. And I have here some lye soap that was made here at Brattonsville, and I have my pocket knife. And we're just going to shave soap off. Oh, look, the wind is blowing it away. Shave some soap down in here. Now I'm putting hot water in with the soap. Now I have this nice filthy fleece and it is going in the soapy water. Here we go. How brown that water is now. It's like tea. You don't want to slosh it too much. Anytime you agitate the wool too much, it starts to turn into a felt ball, which is not good for making clothes. And that is going to need to soak probably 20 minutes or so. And now that our wool has been soaking in some nice soapy water, it's time to rinse it out. And this is where we get to see how really disgusting that sheep was. I'm going to reach in here and grab some wool, and it is still really hot. I'm going to let it drain out some, and then set it over here. We're going to rinse it. So now we have some nice clean wool. You're going to lay it out somewhere to dry, usually out in the yard in the sunshine, or we're going to lay it over here on a table and spread it out so that it can dry. May take it a couple of days to dry, but after that, then it's ready to start processing the next step to making it into cloth. Depending on how dirty your sheep was, it might need to be washed again before you process it on through.
Hello, I'm Marissa Gordon, and I'm an interpreter here at Historic Brattonsville. Today I'm going to be demonstrating the use of the spinning wheel and also carding as part of wool production. Here we have a Gulf Coast lamb. She's about 2 months old, but all of the wool that we are going to be showcasing here today comes from this specific breed of sheep. After the wool has been washed, the next step in textile production would be carding the wool to prepare it for spinning. Now you can see the wool is very clean here, but it still has little bits of debris and such within the fibers. So what we need to do is clean out these last little bits of debris, and we also need to make sure the fibers are all moving in one direction. So in order to do your carding, the first thing you would need are a pair of wool cards. These are wool cards right here. They have a wooden handle and they have thin metal teeth. And the thin metal teeth act as combs, which comb the wool and allow you to remove any debris and also align the fibers of the wool all in one direction so that you would be able to feed them into your spinning wheel and create your yarn. Now this work, this carding work, would have been done by the younger children in the home, and it's something that takes a lot of upper body strength and would be a long and involved chore because carding the entire fleece of a sheep would be a long activity. Now here you can see the difference between the washed wool and the wool that has been carded. You can see that the fibers of the carded wool are all aligned in the same direction, and you can see the difference between the fibers that are in my hand and the fibers that are on the wool card. You can also see how it's much easier to pick out the debris once you've begun the carding process. So once you've carded the wool on one side, you remove the wool from the cards, you flip it over, and you continue on. Once you have sufficiently carded your wool, The next step is to roll it together into what's called a roll-log. And this is what you are going to use to feed into your spinning wheel to create your wool yarn. So this is the roll-log that I created with our wool carts, and you can see that it is feeding very nicely into the spinning wheel, and it is creating fine yarn which will be further processed after the spinning process is complete. The spinning wheel takes the carded wool and turns it into yarn. You can see that I'm feeding the carded wool into the orifice of the spinning wheel. The wheel turns, and the drive band here is what spins the bobbin. And as the bobbin spins, it creates the twist that will create the yarn. And you'll see it in action right here. So spinning was a job that was primarily done by women in the home. And spinning actually had a resurgence during the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, American colonists did not want to purchase cloth from England. And so as part of the war effort, women around the country, and especially in New England, took up spinning so that they could produce the yarn to weave their own cloth, so they would not have to buy cloth from England and pay the taxes associated with the cloth. So this was the very first part of textile production to be mechanized. The original machine that was used to produce spun cloth was called a spinning jenny. Now, as you can see, as I continue to spin, I'm using my foot to press down the treadle, which provides the spin for the wheel, which spins the bobbin and the flyer, which provides the tension, which spins the carded wool into yarn. And this is a very long and laborious process. It takes quite some time to be able to produce enough yarn in order to even make something simple like a hat or a pair of mittens. But this is the kind of work that was done by women in the colonies, both during the Revolution and before, and even in some parts after. And it would be something that would be done by women in order to produce cloth and clothing and yarn for their families. After you are finished filling up your bobbin, you have what's called one-ply yarn. But in order to have a finished product, which you see here, you need two-ply yarn. So you would have to fill up another whole bobbin worth of thread, and then you would have to ply them together to make your finished product, which you see here. Once the yarn has been prepared, the next step would be to dye it. Now here I have an example of yarn that was spun and dyed here at Brattonsville. Now you can use dyes from the natural environment, and this specific piece right here was dyed using black walnut. And you can see there are two different colors in the piece. It is both from the black walnut, but the darker side was left in the dye pot longer than the lighter side. So you can see you can get a variety of different colors even using the same natural dyes. And once the dyeing is complete, you would knit together whatever you were making, be it a hat, be it mittens, be it a scarf, for your family at home.
Hi, and welcome to the Weave House. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about weaving in the 18th and 19th century, but first I'd like to introduce you to our loom. This is Virginia. Now, Virginia is not original to Brattonsville. She's actually from the state of Virginia, and she's from about the mid-19th century. So many of the parts and pieces on her are actually original. In the 18th century, we know that there was a loom here because it was left by Martha Bratton. She actually willed it to one of her sons. Now, we don't know what happened to that loom after her death and after it was willed away. Looms are very interesting pieces. They're really meant to be up and standing like this for only a certain period of time. And then when you're done, you can take them apart and put them up in a corner. What happens to a lot of looms, as would probably happen to Martha's loom, is it was just put up in a corner in a barn somewhere and left to rot. Now, the interesting thing about Martha's weaving in the 18th century is that a lot of middle-class women who had the space and could afford it actually got looms to be patriotic. Now, the interesting thing is that either Martha or an enslaved person could have been the person actually working the loom, dressing it, and setting it up. We don't know who it was, but it's always a possibility. Now, in the 19th century, there wasn't really any documentation of a working loom here at Brattonsville. During the 1840s and 50s, the Brattons were primarily concerned with the growing of cotton and not so much the weaving, which could be done on an industrial scale. However, there were small weavers in the area. We actually have one of their homes here. And so there is evidence of certainly weavers in York County, in Chester County, and around the surrounding area. Alrighty, so now I'll tell you a little bit about the parts of the loom and of course the fabric that I'm weaving here. Number one, the fabric that I'm weaving is cotton grown here at Brattonsville several years ago. So we have literally gone from the seed all the way to a fabric. The fabric that we're weaving here is called broken twill cambric. And the interesting part about this is we've actually found evidence of cambric being sold in the general store here in the 1870s, possibly even earlier. So what we're weaving here is really a reproduction of that, and you're welcome to take a look closer at the fabric. Now, before we get the fibers onto the loom, there's a pretty extensive process to get each of these individual threads. This is called a warping board. These series of pegs actually measure out a distance of thread, and so what this red line represents is the distance of thread that we've done to get onto this loom. So what we do is actually follow this red string with our cotton from Brattonsville, and we would group these up into bouts or groups of 100. Like I say, there's about 900 threads on here, so we did that 9 times, and that's when we could actually put this on the loom and start dressing it. Now, of course, to get our weave structure and the pattern that you've seen here, we follow a very strict diagram, which I have in my booklet over here. And these numbers correspond to the petals, 1, 2, 3, and 4, on the bottom of our treadle. So what we can do is press the specific petals where we are in the pattern, and that will automatically send our petals here up, which rhymes quite marvelously. Now when we do this, all of these fibers are a little jumbled up, so what we're going to want to do is slam it. This will open up a nice gap here where we can then take our shuttle and slide it through and create our weaving pattern. Now the shuttle should go through on one pass. Once we have our fiber, we want to put it in at an angle, and then we'll let go of the petals and slam it once more, adding one more layer to our weave here. Now, as you can see, there are 2 points of direction here. There's a warp going this way, and our weft, which we've just woven with our shuttle. Now, the warp, of course, is part of dressing the loom or putting all of these fibers on here. For this specific width of fabric, which is about 45 inches, there are over 900 individual threads, and these are threaded individually through this right here. This metal piece is called a reed, and these individual threads are laced via a sleigh hook, 2 threads each, to create this pattern. They are then woven on the back of the beam, and as we progressively put more fabric on here, we'll wind it forward, making more and more fabric.